Hey guys, I'm a Magpie. I read stories. My camera's a little bad, but we'll go with it. Okay, so today we are going with, I'm going to be reading The Five Wise Words as put together in this, which is my favorite fairy tale collection of all time. It's kind of stupid. It's like a Reader's Digest one. They're usually kind of lame, but I love these. I grew up with these. Actually, this copy, there's a second one that goes along with it. My grandma had them at her house, and when I would go over to Grandma and Grandpa's house, it was, oh, where's Magpie? Oh, she's in the back room with the fairy tale books again. Whatever. It's the world's best fairy tales, as edited by Belle Becker Seidman. It was put out by the Reader's Digest Association in 1977 or so, looks like. There's several different copyright dates on here, but it looks like 67, 77, somewhere in there. Anyway, alright, here we go. I'm going to read this. It's called The Five Wise Words. This is one that I liked as a kid just because I liked the way that the foreshadowing worked out and everything, but whatever. Yeah, I'm just going to read it and we'll just go with that. So, once there lived a handsome young man named Ram Singh, who, though a favorite with everyone, was unhappy because he had a sharp-tongued, nagging stepmother. Gotta love those. All day long she went on talking until the youth was so distracted that he determined to go away and seek his fortune, as one does. No sooner had he decided to leave his home than he made his plans, and the very next morning he started off with a few clothes wrapped in a bundle and a little money in his pocket. But there was one person in the village to whom the young man wished to say goodbye, and that was the wise old guru, or teacher, who had taught him a great deal. So he turned his face first of all towards his master's hut, and before the sun was well up, was knocking at his door. The old man received his pupil affectionately, but he was wise in reading faces, and he saw at once that the youth was troubled. "My son," he said quietly, "what is the matter?" "Oh, nothing, father," replied the young man, "but I have determined to go out into the world and seek my fortune." "Be advised," said the guru, "and remain in your father's house. It is better to have half a loaf at home than to seek a whole one in distant countries." But Ram Singh was in no mood to heed such advice, and very soon the old man ceased to press him. "Well," he said at last, "if your mind is made up, I suppose you must have your way. But listen carefully, and remember 5 parting counsels, which I will give to you. And if you keep these, no evil shall befall you. First, always obey without question the orders of him whose service you enter. Second, never speak harshly or unkindly to anyone. And third, never lie. Fourth, never try to appear the equal of those above you in station. And fifth, wherever you go, if you meet those who read or teach from the holy books, stay and listen, if but for a few moments, that you might be strengthened on the path of duty." Then Ram Singh started out on his journey, promising to bear in mind the old man's words. After some days he came to a great city. He had spent all the money that he had brought with him, and therefore resolved to look for work, however humble it may be. Catching sight of a prosperous-looking merchant standing in front of a grain shop, Ram Singh asked whether he could give him anything to do. The merchant gazed at him so long that the young man began to lose heart, but at last the merchant answered him. "Yes, of course, there is a place waiting for you." "What do you mean?" asked Ram Singh. "Why," replied the other, "yesterday our Rajah's chief vizier dismissed his body servant and is looking for another. Now you are just the sort of person he needs, for you are young and tall and handsome, and I advise you to apply there." Thanking the merchant for this advice, the young man set out at once for the vizier's house. On account of his good looks and appearance, he was engaged as the great man's servant. One day soon after this, the Rajah started out on a journey, and his chief vizier accompanied him. With them was an army of servants and attendants, soldiers, muleteers, camel drivers, merchants with grain and stores for man and beast, singers to make entertainment along the way, and musicians to accompany them, besides elephants and camels and horses and mules, ponies, donkeys, goats, and carts and wagons of every kind and description. The caravan seemed more like a large town on the march than anything else. Thus they traveled, till at last they entered a country that was like a sea of sand, where the swirling dust floated in clouds, and men and beasts were half choked by it. Toward the close of the day they came to a village. The headmen hurried out to salute the Rajah and pay him their respects, but they soon began, with very long and serious faces, to explain that while they and all they had were of course at the disposal of the Rajah, the coming of so large a company had put them in a dreadful difficulty. They had neither well nor a spring in their country, and so they had no water to give drink to such an army of men and beasts. Great fear fell upon the caravan at the words of the headman, but the Rajah merely told the vizier that he must get water somehow, and that settled the matter as far as he was concerned. The vizier set off in haste for all the oldest men in the town and began to question them as to whether there were any wells in the neighborhood. The men all looked helplessly at each other and said nothing, but at length one old greybeard replied, "Truly, Sir Vizier, there is, within a mile or two of this village, a well which some former king made hundreds of years ago. It is, they say, a great and inexhaustible well, covered in heavy stonework, with a long flight of steps leading into the water in the very bowels of the earth. But no man dares go near it, because it is haunted by evil spirits, and it is known that whoever disappears down into the well shall never be seen again." The vizier stroked his beard and considered a moment. Then he turned to Ram Singh, who stood behind his chair. "There is a proverb," said he, "that no man can be trusted until he has been tried. Go and get the Rajah and his people water from the well." I'm going to pause here because there's an illustration. So lovely. You probably can't see what that is at all, but this is that's Ram Singh and presumably the vizier. Then there flashed in Ram Singh's mind the first counsel of the old guru: "Always obey without question the order of him whose services you enter." So he replied at once that he was ready and left to prepare for his adventure. He fastened 2 great brass vessels to a mule, 2 lesser ones he bound on his own shoulders, and thus provided, he set out with the old villager for his guide. In a short time they came within sight of a spot where some big trees towered above the barren country, while in their shadow lay the dome of an ancient building. This the guide pointed out as the well, but he excused himself from going further, saying he was an old man and tired, and it was already sunset, so Ram Singh bade him farewell and went on alone. Arriving at the trees, Ram Singh tied up his mule, lifted the 2 large vessels down, and, having found the opening of the well, descended a flight of steps into the darkness. The steps were broad, white slabs of alabaster, which gleamed in the shadows as he went lower and lower. All was very silent. Even the sound of his bare feet upon the steps seemed to wake and echo in that lonely place, and when one of the vessels he was carrying fell, it clanged so loudly that he jumped. Still he went on, until at last he reached a wide pool of sweet water, where he washed his jars with care, and then filled them, and began to remount the steps carrying the lighter vessels. The big ones were so heavy that he could only take up one at a time. Suddenly something moved, and above him he saw a great giant standing on the stairway. In one hand the giant held clasped to his heart a dreadful-looking mass of bones, and in the other was a lamp which cast long shadows about the walls, and made him seem even more terrible than he really was. "What think you, O mortal," said the giant, "of my fair and lovely wife?" And he held the light towards the bones in his arms, and looked lovingly at them. Now this poor giant had had a very beautiful wife, whom he loved dearly, but when she died, he refused to believe in her death, and always carried her about, even long after she became nothing but bones. Ram Singh, of course, did not know this, but there came into his mind the second wise saying of the Guru, which forbade him to speak harshly or inconsiderately of others. So he replied, "Truly, sir, I am sure you could nowhere find such another." "Ah, what eyes you have!" cried the delighted giant. "You, at least, can see. I do not know how often I have slain those who insulted her by saying she was but dry bones. You are a very fine young man, and I will help you." So saying, he laid down the bones with great tenderness, and snatching up the huge brass vessels, carried them up and put them on the mule with such ease that it was all done by the time Ram Singh had reached the open air with the smaller jars. "Now," said the giant, "you have pleased me, and you may ask of me one favor. Whatever you wish, I will do for you. Perhaps you would like me to show you where lies buried the treasure of dead kings?" he added eagerly. But Ram Singh shook his head at the mention of buried wealth. "The favor I would ask," he said, "is that you would leave off haunting this well, so that men may freely go in and out to obtain water." Perhaps the giant expected some favor more difficult to grant, for his face brightened, and he promised to depart at once. As Ram Singh went off through the gathering darkness with his precious burden of water, he beheld the giant striding away with the bones of his dead wife in his arms. Great was the wonder and rejoicing in the camp when Ram Singh returned with the water. He said nothing about his adventure with the giant, but merely told the Rajah there was nothing to prevent the well from being used. And used it was, and no one ever saw anything more of the giant. The Rajah was so pleased with the bearing of Ram Singh that he ordered the vizier to give the young man to him in exchange for one of his own servants. So Ram Singh became the Rajah's attendant. Sorry, my computer. So Ram Singh became the Rajah's attendant. And as the days went by, the Rajah became more and more delighted with the youth because, being ever mindful of the old Guru's third counsel, he was always honest and spoke the truth. He grew in favor rapidly until at last the Rajah made him his treasurer, and thus he reached a high place in the court and had wealth and power in his hands. Unluckily, the Rajah had a brother who was a very bad man. This brother thought that if he could win the young treasurer over to his side, he might by these means manage to steal, little by little, as much of the Rajah's treasures as he needed. Then, with the money, he could bribe the soldiers and some of the Rajah's counselors to dethrone and kill his brother, and he would reign himself. He was too wary, of course, to tell Ram Singh of these wicked plans, but he began by flattering him whenever he saw him, and at last he offered him his daughter in marriage. But Ram Singh remembered the fourth counsel of the old Guru, never to try to appear equal to those above him in station, and therefore he respectfully declined the great honor of marrying a princess. The prince, thwarted at the very beginning of his enterprise, was furious. He determined to bring about Ram Singh's ruin, and he told the Rajah that his treasurer had spoken insulting words about his sovereign and also about the princess. What those words were, nobody knew, and as the story was not true, the wicked prince did not know either, but the Rajah grew very angry and red in the face as he listened, and he declared that until Ram Singh's head was cut off, neither he, nor the princess, nor his brother would eat nor drink. But, the Rajah added, I do not wish anyone to know that this was done by my desire, and anyone who mentioned the subject will be severely punished. And with this, the prince was forced to be content. Then the Rajah sent for an officer of his guard and told him to take some soldiers and ride at once to a tower outside the town. If anyone came to inquire when the building was going to be finished, or asked any other questions about it, the officer must chop his head off and bring it to the Rajah. As for the body, that should be buried on the spot. The old officer thought these instructions rather odd, but it was no business of his, so he saluted and went off to do his master's bidding. Early in the morning, the Rajah, who had not slept all night, set for Ram Singh. He bade him to go to the new hunting tower and ask the people there how it was getting on and when it was going to be finished, and then to hurry back with the answer. Away went Ram Singh upon his errand, but on the road, as he was passing a little temple on the outskirts of the city, he heard someone reading aloud. Remembering the Guru's fifth counsel, he stepped inside and sat down to listen. He did not mean to stay for long, but became so interested in the wisdom of the teacher that he sat and sat and sat while the sun rose higher and higher. In the meantime, the wicked prince, who dared not disobey the Rajah's command, was feeling very hungry, and the princess was quietly crying in a corner, waiting for news of Ram Singh's death so that she might eat her breakfast. Hours passed, and stare as he might from the window, the prince could not see any messengers. At last he could not bear it any longer, and hastily disguising himself so that no one should recognize him, he jumped on a horse and galloped out to the hunting tower where the Rajah had told him the execution was to take place. But when he arrived, there was only some men engaged in building and a number of soldiers idly watching them. He forgot that he had disguised himself and that no one would know him, and he cried out, "Now there, you men! Why are you idling about here instead of finishing what you came to do? When is it to be done?" At his words, the soldiers looked at the commanding officer, who was standing a little apart from the rest. Unnoticed by the prince, he made a slight sign. A sword flashed in the sun, and off flew the head to the ground beneath. As part of the prince's disguise had been a thick beard, the men did not recognize the dead man as the Rajah's brother. They wrapped the head in a cloth and buried the body as their commander bade them. When this was ended, the officer took the cloth and rode off in the direction of the palace. Meanwhile, the Rajah came home from his council, and to his great surprise found neither head nor brother awaiting him. As time passed, he became uneasy and thought he had better go and see what the matter was. So, ordering his horse, he rode off alone. Just as the Rajah came near the temple where Ram Singh still sat, the young treasurer, hearing the sound of a horse's hoofs, looked over his shoulder and saw that the rider was the Rajah himself. Feeling much ashamed for having forgotten his errand, he jumped up and hurried out to meet his master, who reined in his horse and seemed very surprised, as indeed he was, to see him. At that moment, the officer arrived, carrying his parcel. He saluted the Rajah gravely, and dismounting, laid the bundle in the road and began to undo the wrappings, while the Rajah watched him with wonder and amazement. When the last string was undone, and the head of his brother was displayed to his view, the Rajah sprang from his horse and caught the officer by the arm. As soon as he could speak, he questioned the man as to what had occurred, and little by little a dark suspicion grew. Then, telling the soldier he had done well, the Rajah drew Ram Singh to one side, and in a few minutes learned from him how, in attending to the Guru's counsel, he had delayed in doing his ruler's bidding. In the end, the Rajah found proof of his dead brother's treachery, and Ram Singh established his innocence and integrity. He continued to serve the Rajah for many years with unswerving fidelity, married a maiden of his own rank, with whom he lived happily, and died honored and loved by all men. Sons were born to him, and in time to them also he taught the 5 wise sayings of the old Guru. It says this is an old Punjabi tale from the Andrew Lang collection. The end. Alright, that's all for this time. Yeah, thanks for sticking around. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a message in the comments if there's a particular fairy tale you'd like to have me read. Weirder the better. I like the strange ones. That's why I started with this one instead of Snow White or Sleeping Beauty or something like that. So that's it for today. Y'all have a fantastic day. See you later.